No one in the diner noticed the alien waitress shaking, no one except the tired human sitting alone with a small child. If he had looked away for even 1 second, history would have moved on exactly as planned. But he didn't. And because of that single question, everything began to break. Jackson Reed had learned to see what others ignored. It came from years of fixing broken machines that rich corporations had already written off as scrap. From raising a child alone on a frontier world that barely tolerated humans. From surviving long after life had stopped being fair. He sat in the corner booth of a dim, off-route space diner, one arm around his 6-year-old son, Milo. Outside the wide viewport, cargo ships drifted past like slow-moving stars. Inside, the air smelled of recycled oxygen, warm oil, and unfamiliar spices. "This place is weird," Milo whispered, swinging his legs. "I like it." Jackson smiled faintly. Weird foods usually cheaper. Credits were always tight. They had been ever since Jackson left the core worlds after his wife died during a colonial evacuation. Frontier planets didn't ask questions, but they didn't forgive mistakes either. Humans here were tolerated because they were useful, engineers, scavengers, problem solvers. Nothing more. A slender alien waitress approached their table. She looked almost fragile, with pale silver-blue skin and eyes too large for her narrow face. Her uniform hung a little loose, as if she had lost weight recently. When she reached out to place their drinks on the table, her hands trembled. Not just a little. Enough that liquid sloshed over the rim. Jackson's eyes narrowed. The waitress froze, clearly aware she had been noticed. She pulled her hands back quickly and forced a polite smile. "Apologies," she said in careful standard. "I will replace that." "It's fine," Jackson said calmly. "You didn't spill much." Milo leaned forward, curiosity bright on his face. "Why are you shaking?" Jackson winced. "Milo." But the waitress didn't snap or scold. Instead, her eyes flicked toward the back of the diner, where a massive, armored alien sat watching them. The creature's many eyes blinked slowly. "Waiting. I am just tired," she said softly. Jackson knew that tone. He had used it himself when creditors called, when officials asked questions he couldn't afford to answer. "Tired doesn't do that," he said gently, nodding at her hands. The waitress swallowed. "I shouldn't." The armored alien shifted in his seat. Jackson leaned back, keeping his voice low and calm. "You don't have to tell me anything. But if something's wrong, pretending it isn't won't fix it." For a moment, she looked like she might run. Then something in her broke. "My employment ends tonight," she whispered. "Without notice. Without severance." "I'm sorry," Jackson said. "It is worse," she continued, her voice shaking harder than her hands now. "My species requires regulated stabilizers to survive long-term off-world. The medication is provided only through licensed employers." Milo frowned. "So, if you don't work, you get sick." The waitress nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. "Very sick. And I send most of my credits home. My mother's health is failing." Jackson felt something cold settle in his chest. "So they're firing you," he said slowly, "and cutting your access at the same time." "Yes." "That's illegal under interstellar labor codes," Jackson said. She gave a sad smile. "Only if enforced. Humans know this well." He couldn't argue. The armored alien at the back stood up. The floor vibrated slightly as he walked toward them. The waitress stiffened in fear. "That's your manager?" Jackson asked quietly. "Yes." The manager stopped beside their table, towering over them. His voice was deep and heavy, full of authority. "Is there a problem here?" "No," the waitress said quickly. "I was just—" "She was serving us," Jackson interrupted, standing slowly. Humans were smaller than most species, but they had learned how to stand their ground without shouting. "She spilled a drink," the manager said. "It reflects poorly." "Then charge me for it," Jackson replied. Problem solved. The manager's many eyes focused on him. "This does not concern you, human." It does when you threaten someone in front of my kid. A pause. The manager snorted. You people always involve yourselves. Yes, Jackson said. We do. The manager leaned closer. You should leave. Jackson met his gaze without blinking. After we eat. Silence stretched. Finally, the manager turned away with a dismissive gesture. Finish your shift. Then go. The waitress exhaled shakily. I'm sorry, she whispered. I caused trouble. No, Jackson said. You told the truth. Milo reached out and tugged gently at her sleeve. My dad fixes broken things. Jackson blinked. He fixes ships, heaters, radios, everything, Milo continued proudly. Maybe he can fix this too. The waitress looked at Jackson with fragile hope and disbelief. Jackson hesitated. He had promised himself he wouldn't get involved again. Promised Milo a quiet life. Safe. Predictable. But humans had never survived by keeping their heads down. I run a repair yard, Jackson said slowly. Mostly alien tech. I've been losing contracts because clients don't trust humans with sensitive systems. She listened closely. I need someone who understands non-human protocols, he continued. Someone calm under pressure. Someone observant. Her eyes widened. I can't promise safety, he added. Or riches. But I can promise registered employment. Medical access. And a place where no one fires you without explanation. Tears spilled freely now. You would do this, for a stranger. For someone who deserves better, Jackson said. Interviews tomorrow. If you want it. The manager watched from across the diner, clearly displeased. Jackson didn't care. Milo grinned. See? Fixing. The waitress laughed weakly through her tears. My name is Salith, she said. And, yes. I want that. As she walked away to prepare their food, Jackson felt a strange pull in his chest. Not attraction, not pity. Recognition. He didn't know it yet, but Salith wasn't just a waitress. And the reason she was shaking had nothing to do with fear alone. Above them, unseen sensors activated. Somewhere far beyond the colony, ancient systems began to wake. And for the first time in centuries, alien observers marked a single human name for review. Jackson Reed. Jackson didn't know the diner had cameras that didn't belong to the diner. He didn't know the manager wasn't just a manager. And he definitely didn't know that the moment Salith said yes, a silent alert pinged across the sector, tagged priority, human interference. But he would learn. Because some secrets don't stay buried once a human decides to fix what's broken. The next morning, Jackson's repair yard smelled like metal dust and hot coolant. It was a messy place, full of half-repaired machines and old parts stacked like a graveyard of alien technology. But it was honest work. Jackson liked honest work. Milo sat on a crate with a handheld puzzle screen, humming to himself. He had learned to entertain himself in places where adults were always busy. Jackson hated that, but he also admired his son's quiet strength. The front door chime rang. Jackson wiped his hands and stepped into the small office area that served as a waiting room. Salith stood there, holding a thin travel bag and looking like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were brighter today, though, determined. Good morning, she said carefully. You came, Jackson replied. I didn't have many options, she admitted, then added quickly, but I also wanted to. Jackson nodded. Fair enough. Let's talk. He offered her the chair across from his desk. She sat with perfect posture, as if she had been trained to hide weakness. Jackson tapped open a contract template on his old terminal. This is standard independent shop employment. It'll register you under my business license. That means legal access to medical stabilizers through the colony clinic. Salith's hands trembled again, but less than before. You can do that so fast. I can do paperwork faster than I can rebuild a warp coil, Jackson said. And that's saying something. Milo peeked around the doorway, staring at Salith like she was a new episode of his favorite show. Salith smiled at him. Hello again, Milo. Do you live here now? Milo asked bluntly. Jackson opened his mouth to correct him. Salith answered gently, not yet. But I might work here. Milo nodded like that solved everything in the universe, then went back to his puzzle. Jackson lowered his voice. Before I file this, I need to ask. Are you in trouble beyond losing your job? Salith's gaze shifted to the window. Outside, a pair of hover patrol drones drifted by. Normal. Common. But her face tightened anyway. I am in danger, she whispered. Jackson's muscles tensed. From who? Salith's lips parted, then closed. She looked like someone weighing whether truth would kill her faster than silence. Finally, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small metal cylinder, the size of 2 fingers. It looked old, scratched, and strangely heavy for its size. She placed it on the desk like it might explode. What is that? Jackson asked. A custody seal, she said. It was implanted into my employment records without my consent. It marks me as owned. Jackson's jaw hardened. That's slavery. Salith flinched at the word, like it burned. They call it debt attachment. My species is not powerful. We are tolerated, not protected. When my father died, the clan lenders came. They offered medicine for my mother. Food. A ship ticket off our dying moon. Her voice cracked. The cost was me. Jackson stared at the cylinder, then at her. So the diner was part of it. Yes. The manager is not a manager. He is a collector. He monitors my compliance. Jackson felt a cold anger rise, slow, heavy, controlled. The kind that didn't scream. The kind that built something sharp inside a person. Why tell me, he asked. If he's watching you, why risk this? Salith swallowed. Because you stood up to him. Humans stand up to things that should crush them. Jackson didn't respond. He looked at Milo, small and unaware, tapping his screen. Then he looked back at Salith. If you sign with me, the collector will come. He'll say I stole property. Yes. And if I refuse to sign, you lose your stabilizers and your mother loses your support. Salith nodded, tears forming again. I'm sorry. Jackson exhaled slowly. Don't be. He slid the contract terminal toward her. Sign it. Salith froze. Jackson. Sign it, he repeated, firmer. We'll deal with the rest. Her hands shook as she pressed her thumb to the scanner. The contract stamped as valid. Registration completed. Medical access approved. The system chimed. Salith's shoulders sagged like a weight had lifted. And then the front door chime rang again. A heavier sound followed, like a boot step on thin flooring. Jackson stood instantly. Salith turned pale, her eyes wide with fear. He's here. The collector entered. He was even more intimidating in daylight. Tall, thick, plated in dark armor that looked grown rather than built. His face had ridges like stone. His eyes were clustered in a pattern that gave the impression he could watch in every direction at once. He didn't bother with greetings. You have filed a claim, he said, voice flat. That worker is under debt attachment. She's under my employment, Jackson said, stepping forward. Which means she's protected by colonial labor law. The collector laughed once, humorless. Colonial law does not override clan debt. This colony is under Confederation Charter, Jackson replied. That charter bans ownership of sentient beings. The collector's eyes narrowed. Humans love paper. It will not save you. Jackson didn't back up. Try me. For a moment, the collector's gaze drifted to Milo. The child looked up from his screen, sensing tension. Jackson's blood turned to ice. Do not look at my son, he said quietly. The collector's mouth curled slightly. Your species is amusing. You build homes in storms and call it courage. He stepped closer to Salith. She trembled harder, as if her body remembered pain. You will come with me, the collector said. No, Jackson snapped. The collector's hand moved, fast, toward Salitha's wrist. Jackson reacted without thinking. He grabbed the collector's forearm. The alien's skin was like armored cable. Jackson's fingers slipped slightly, but he held on anyway. The collector paused, visibly surprised. Humans rarely touched his kind. Jackson leaned in. "If you take her, you'll have to go through me." The collector stared at him for 2 long seconds. Then he spoke a single phrase, not in standard but in a deep-coded tongue. The air seemed to vibrate with it. Salith gasped and collapsed to her knees, clutching her chest. "Salith!" Jackson dropped instantly beside her. Milo stood up, frightened. "Dad, what's happening?" Salitha's breathing became shallow. Her skin flickered faintly, almost like light underwater. Jackson looked up at the collector, rage blazing now. "What did you do?" "I activated the seal," the collector said calmly. "It ensures obedience. It also ensures silence." Jackson's mind raced. He had seen control tech before, shock implants, neural clamps, but this looked different. Salitha's eyes met his, full of panic. "Jackson," she whispered, barely audible. "It's not just debt." He leaned close. "Then what is it?" Her lips trembled. "There is something, inside my blood. Something old. Something they fear." The collector's eyes hardened. "Enough." Jackson's hands moved fast, not with strength, but with skill. He grabbed a diagnostic wand from the wall. He slammed it against the custody cylinder still on the desk. The screen lit up with an unfamiliar energy signature, complex, layered, and pulsing like a heartbeat. Jackson's mechanic instincts screamed the same truth they always did. This thing was built. And built things could be broken. Or rewritten. He looked at Salith, then at Milo, then back at the collector. "Get out," Jackson said. The collector didn't move. Jackson's voice dropped to something dangerously calm. "You have no idea what humans do when you hurt our family." The collector finally spoke, slow and certain. "You have 3 days, human. Return the asset, or I take payment in other forms." He turned and walked out as if he owned the air itself. The door closed. Silence remained. Salith lay trembling on the floor, breath ragged. Jackson held her shoulders gently, like steadying a machine before it shattered. "We're going to fix this," he said. Salitha's eyes fluttered. "You can't, it's ancient, it's..." Jackson glanced at the custody seal's readout again. The signature was unlike anything in standard alien tech. And it reminded him, painfully, of the weird salvaged circuitry he'd once found inside a dead ship hull years ago. The kind that didn't have a manufacturer tag. The kind people whispered about. Jackson tightened his grip. "Then we learn it. We outthink it. We outbuild it." Milo stepped closer, voice small but firm. "Dad, can humans win?" Jackson looked at his son and forced a steady smile. "Yeah, kid," he said. "We're the species that wins after everyone says we can't." The problem with ancient technology was not that it was powerful. The problem was that it was forgotten. And forgotten things were dangerous, especially when humans decided to understand them instead of fear them. Jackson didn't sleep that night. He sat in his workshop long after Milo had drifted off on a cot near the back office, clutching his favorite blanket. Salith lay on a medical pad nearby, stabilized but unconscious, faint lines of light pulsing beneath her silver-blue skin in slow, uneven rhythms. The custody seal sat on Jackson's workbench. He stared at it like a puzzle that insulted him by existing. Alien tech usually followed patterns. Even the strangest devices obeyed rules: energy in, energy out, logic layered like machinery inside machinery. This seal didn't. Its signal folded in on itself, looping through dimensions Jackson's tools barely knew how to describe. And yet, he could feel the logic. Not emotionally. Mechanically. "This thing was built by someone who thought like an engineer," Jackson muttered. That realization chilled him. Humans weren't supposed to recognize this design language. According to official records, The creators of pre-expansion relics were extinct long before humanity left Earth. Their systems were considered untouchable, too complex, too alien. Jackson cracked his knuckles and activated his custom analyzer. "Well," he said quietly, "let's disappoint a few civilizations." Salith woke with a sharp gasp. Jackson was instantly at her side. "Easy. You're safe." Her eyes darted around the workshop, panic flaring, then settling when she saw Milo asleep. "You did not return me," she whispered. "No," Jackson said. "I don't return people." She tried to sit up and winced. "The seal, it will activate again. Stronger next time." "Not if I get to it first." Salith stared at him. "You don't understand. That device is not just control. It's a key." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "Key to what?" Salith hesitated. Then she spoke words that made the room feel suddenly smaller. "To an inheritance older than the Confederation. Older than recorded war. My species was chosen to carry it, because we were weak enough to be ignored." Jackson folded his arms. "I'm guessing that plan didn't account for humans." "No," Salith said softly. "No one ever does." She explained in fragments at first. Her people, the Velith, had once served as biological custodians for something called the Continuum Archive. Not a weapon. Not knowledge alone. A fail-safe. When ancient civilizations rose too fast, destroyed themselves, or threatened reality itself, the archive intervened. It didn't attack. It rebalanced. Quietly. Efficiently. Salith's blood carried the last living interface. Not because she was special. Because her ancestors had been forgotten. "They enslave us," she said, "because they fear the archive awakening through an unapproved species." Jackson rubbed his face slowly. "And let me guess, if the wrong people activate it, everyone loses." Salith nodded. "Entire regions of space have gone silent because of misuse." Jackson looked at the custody seal again. "So this thing keeps you suppressed?" "Yes." "And if it fails?" Salith met his eyes. "Then the archive notices me." Jackson exhaled. "No pressure." At that moment, Milo stirred. "Dad," he mumbled. "Is the blue lady okay?" Salith smiled weakly. "I'm fine, Milo." Milo sat up, studying the glowing patterns beneath her skin. "You look like the night sky." Jackson watched her expression change, soften. "That's what my mother used to say," Salith replied. Something clicked in Jackson's mind. "You don't need a weapon," he said suddenly. "You need a lockpick." Salith blinked. "What?" "This seal controls access through suppression, not encryption," Jackson continued, pacing now. "It forces compliance by stabilizing your biology below activation threshold." He pulled up a schematic on his display, rapidly sketching ideas. "But it still has to communicate with the archive's dormant protocols." Salith's breath caught. "You're saying?" "I'm saying if I reroute the interface," Jackson finished, "the seal becomes a translator instead of a leash." "That's impossible," she whispered. Jackson smiled thinly. "That's what they said about human jump drives." The collector returned before dawn. This time, he didn't come alone. Hovercraft settled around the repair yard, their hulls marked with clan insignia. Armored enforcers surrounded the building, weapons charged but not yet fired. They didn't need to rush. They believed the outcome was inevitable. The collector stepped forward. "You were warned," he called. Jackson didn't respond. Inside, he secured Milo in the reinforced back room. "No matter what happens," he said gently, kneeling, "you stay here." Milo nodded, eyes wide but brave. "Be careful, Dad." Jackson stood and turned to Salith. The modified seal rested in his palm, humming differently now, smoother, warmer. "Once I attach this," he said, "they'll know something's wrong." Salith straightened, fear and resolve mixing in her eyes. "Then we do not hide." Jackson nodded. "That's the human way." He opened the front door. The collector's eyes narrowed instantly. "What have you done?" he demanded. Jackson held up the device. "Improved it." The collector raised a hand. Enforcers aimed weapons. Salith stepped forward beside Jackson. The seal activated. Light flared, not violently, but clearly. The air vibrated with a tone that wasn't sound but certainty. Sensors across the colony screamed alerts. Long dormant satellites adjusted their orbits. Somewhere far beyond known space, systems older than empires listened. The collector staggered back. "Deactivate it." Salith gasped, not in pain, but in clarity. Her posture changed. Her trembling stopped. "I can hear it," she whispered. "The archive, it's awake." Jackson felt something press against his mind. Not force, not invasion. A question. Who interferes? Jackson spoke aloud, voice steady. "A human." Silence. Then, unmistakable acknowledgement. The collector screamed. "You don't understand what you've done." Jackson looked at him calmly. "I understand exactly." The enforcer's weapons powered down. Not by command. By override. Across the colony, alien observers froze as systems they believed untouchable responded to a species they had never considered worthy of notice. Salith stood taller now, light flowing through her veins like starlight. "The archive recognizes partnership," she said softly. "Not ownership." Jackson smiled grimly. "Told you. We don't do chains." Above them, the sky shimmered. The galaxy had just learned something terrifying. Humans didn't just survive ancient systems. They understood them. And they asked the questions no one else dared. The galaxy did not panic immediately. That came later. At first, there was silence, the kind that followed a mistake too large to understand all at once. Systems recalibrated. Observers argued. Ancient protocols cross-checked themselves against assumptions that had stood unchallenged for tens of thousands of years. Humans were not supposed to be part of this equation. Jackson felt the change before he saw it. The air around the repair yard grew heavy, charged, like a storm holding its breath. Salith stood beside him, no longer trembling, her posture calm and grounded. The light beneath her skin dimmed to a steady glow, no longer frantic. The collector backed away slowly, fear finally cracking his composure. "This cannot stand," he said. "You have violated inter-civilizational containment." Jackson crossed his arms. "You violated basic decency first." Above them, the sky darkened, not with clouds, but with ships. Sleek, angular vessels bearing markings from multiple factions slid into orbit. These weren't clan enforcers. These were observers, regulators, and, if needed, executioners. Salith inhaled sharply. "They're here to shut this down." Jackson nodded. "Figures." A beam of light descended from the largest ship, forming a holographic platform in the air. Figures appeared, tall, radiant beings with shifting forms that hurt the eyes if stared at too long. The Council of Continuity. Guardians of Ancient Order. One stepped forward. "Human Jackson Reed," it said, voice layered with harmonics. "You have activated a restricted interface. Explain your reasoning." Jackson glanced at Salith, then at the sealed back room where Milo hid. He stepped forward alone. "You built systems to prevent destruction," he said simply. "Then you decided who was allowed to touch them." The council figure tilted its head. "Correct." "You enslaved a species to protect yourselves from risk," Jackson continued. "That's not balance. That's fear management." A ripple passed through the assembled council. Salith spoke then, her voice steady but carrying far. "My people were chosen because we were quiet. Because no one would defend us." The council's gaze shifted to her. "You were preserved." "We were used," she replied. Another figure spoke, colder. "The archive is too powerful to be influenced by emotional species." Jackson laughed once, sharp and humorless. "That's funny. Because emotion is the only reason it hasn't wiped you all out already." Silence fell. You think you're above fear, Jackson continued. But you're not. You just outsourced it. Humans don't do that. And why is that? The first counselor asked. Jackson didn't hesitate. Because we grew up knowing the universe doesn't care about us. That answer landed harder than any threat. The council paused. Ancient minds processed a concept they had never truly modeled, a species that expected nothing from the cosmos and acted anyway. Below, the collector shouted, "They cannot be trusted. Humans escalate every system they touch." Jackson glanced at him. Says the guy who thought pain collars were a good idea. Salith stepped closer to Jackson. The modified seal pulsed softly, responding not to command, but consent. The archive is listening, she said. It will not obey. It will judge. The council's forms flickered. What does it ask? One demanded. Jackson felt the pressure again, that question at the edge of his thoughts. He answered honestly. It asks why you stopped trying to be better. The sky changed. Not violently. Not dramatically. Just differently. Ships lost their perfect formation. Systems hesitated. Long-standing authority wavered as if gravity itself had been reconsidered. The archive spoke, not in words, but in alignment. Control systems across multiple fleets disengaged. Weapons powered down. Ownership markers erased themselves. The collector screamed as the custody seal on Salith's record dissolved into nothing. No, he roared. You'll destabilize everything. Salith looked at him with quiet sorrow. You already did. The council recoiled slightly. This was not the intended outcome. Jackson shrugged. Welcome to humanity. Alarms rang across the orbital fleet, not from attack, but from change. Slave registries collapsed. Hidden labor networks exposed themselves. Entire economic models built on quiet suffering began to unravel. The galaxy pushed back. Sanctions were declared. Human systems were flagged. Trade lanes closed. Warnings broadcast in every major language. Human interference level, unacceptable. On the ground, the repair yard shook as power grids fluctuated. Jackson rushed back inside. Milo burst from the back room. Dad! The lights went weird. Jackson scooped him up. We're okay. Promise. Salith watched them, something deep and unreadable in her eyes. They will punish your species, she said softly. Jackson met her gaze. They already tried ignoring us. That didn't work. The next days were hard. Supplies slowed. Patrols increased. Humans across the colony were questioned, pressured, isolated. But something else happened too. Messages began arriving. Quiet ones. Encrypted ones. Engineers from non-aligned species. Workers freed from debt chains. Scientists who had watched humans rebuild impossible systems from scrap and wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was another way to exist. They didn't ask for leadership. They asked for help. Jackson stood in his workshop one night, watching Milo sleep, Salith reviewing data beside him. You realize, Salith said, you've become a symbol. Jackson groaned. I hate symbols. You are one anyway, she replied. A human who didn't conquer, didn't dominate, just refused to accept what was wrong. Jackson looked at his hands, scarred, oil-stained, human. We're not heroes, he said. We're fixers. Salith smiled. The galaxy needs fixing. Outside, stars burned cold and distant. But for the first time, they were watching humanity not with curiosity or contempt, but with concern. Because the species they had dismissed as fragile had done something far more dangerous than rebel. They had changed the rules. The galaxy expected humanity to escalate. It expected fleets, demands, retaliation, and war. That was how power worked, how it had always worked. What it did not expect was restraint. Jackson Reed stood in his repair yard as dawn broke over the colony. The sky was quieter now. Fewer ships. Fewer patrol drones. The sanctions still existed on paper, but enforcement had grown uncertain. The systems that once obeyed without question now hesitated. Because the archive was still listening. Salith stood beside him, her presence steady and calm. The light beneath her skin had settled into something natural, like a second heartbeat. She no longer looked like someone about to break. Milo played on the floor, building a crooked tower out of spare components. He didn't know he was standing at the center of a galactic shift. "Messages are coming in faster," Salith said. "From everywhere." Jackson nodded. "I figured." The first transmission appeared on the main screen, an alliance of small species asking how to legally dissolve debt contracts. Another followed, engineers requesting help understanding ancient systems without triggering disaster. Then a third, an official council channel, marked urgent. Jackson exhaled slowly. "Here we go." The council appeared, their forms less radiant than before. Less certain. "You have destabilized multiple economic frameworks," one said. "Good," Jackson replied. "They were built on suffering." "You have inspired defiance," another added. "No," Salith said calmly. "We inspired choice." The council paused. "The archive has altered its evaluation metrics," the lead counselor admitted. "It now recognizes collaborative intelligence." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "You mean it noticed we don't treat people like tools?" "That concept is inefficient," the council said. Jackson smiled thinly. "So was thinking the universe owed you control." Silence stretched. Then the council asked the question that mattered. "What does humanity want in return?" Salith looked at Jackson. Jackson looked at Milo. Then he answered. "Nothing." The word echoed heavier than any demand. The council seemed unsettled. "That is not logical." Jackson shrugged. "We don't fix things to own them. We fix them because broken systems hurt people." Salith stepped forward. "The archive should not belong to rulers. Or councils. Or even my people." "Then who?" the council asked. Salith gestured to the colony beyond the workshop. "Everyone willing to listen instead of control." The archive responded, not with approval, but alignment. Across the galaxy, access changed. Knowledge gates opened selectively. Ancient systems responded only to cooperation protocols. Attempts at domination failed silently, refusing to engage. Power no longer rewarded force. It rewarded understanding. Panic rippled through empires built on command. Markets collapsed, then reformed. Species once dismissed as insignificant suddenly mattered, because they could contribute without fear. Humanity did not rise as conquerors. They rose as connectors. Weeks passed. Trade resumed, different now. More careful. Less cruel. Humans became mediators, engineers, translators of impossible systems. Not because they were the smartest, but because they were the ones who asked, "Is this right?" before asking, "Is this useful?" One evening, Jackson sat on the roof of the repair yard, watching stars flicker. Milo leaned against him, sleepy. "Dad," Milo said, "are the aliens still mad?" Jackson chuckled softly. "Some are. Some aren't. Are we in trouble?" Jackson thought about it. "Probably," he said honestly. "But the good kind." Milo smiled. "Okay." Salith joined them, holding a small data slate. The archive sent something. Jackson tensed slightly. "Yeah." She handed it to him. On the screen was a simple message, translated into clear standard. Query resolved. Humanity classified as stewards. Below it, a final line. Recommendation. Do not ignore again. Jackson laughed quietly, shaking his head. "We've been trying to tell them that for centuries." Salith sat beside him. "You changed the future." Jackson looked out at the stars, still dangerous, still vast. "No," he said. "We just fixed one broken thing." Below them, the colony hummed with life, human and alien together. Not perfect. Never perfect. But better. And somewhere deep in ancient space, systems older than memory adjusted their understanding of a small, stubborn species that refused to accept cruelty as normal. Humanity didn't conquer the galaxy. They did something far more frightening. They made it grow up.